Hello and welcome to Glitchy Switch, the podcast all about what it feels like discovering you have ADHD as an adult. My name is Martin and I believe that no one deserves to live in shame in a world not designed for them. So in each episode, I'll pick off the kind of questions that go through your mind on the journey from curiosity to diagnosis. Whether you're on your own journey or supporting someone who is, I hope my own experiences might just help you. I know what it's like to have a busy life and a busy mind, so each episode lasts about as long as a cup of coffee so you can easily fit it in and enjoy without draining too much energy. This week we're getting into the practical, kind of nitty-gritty, if you like, of day-to-day living. One of the really common traits of ADHD is difficulty managing time and keeping to schedules, as you might imagine for a condition that has at its heart a difficulty focusing, an overactive mind, and diverging thoughts. As with many of the traits, I've developed sufficient coping strategies to master this, and I've always prided myself, on sort of being punctual and turning up when I say I'm going to. I can see, though, that this coping has largely taken the form of, I guess you might say, being hyper-vigilant, which makes life really, really tiring. My constant anxiety about dropping balls, messing things up and generally letting people down has meant that I've always gone sort of miles out of my way to try and be on time and not drop anything. When things have leaked through, it's usually because I've relaxed, which is kind of telling, I would say. The signs were always there, though. I always had a kind of, a weird kind of panicky feeling when I looked at my diary. And I'm always panicked when I'm asked to think about plans sort of on the hoof outside of work. It's like I can't quite wrap my head around things thinking on my feet. I need to sit and, oddly, given what I said a minute ago, look at a calendar. Even then, I'll panic I've got things wrong, which means that I rely a lot on my wife, who, thank the Lord, is super organised. Again, like many ADHD traits, the mask takes the form of checking, rechecking, and then checking again, and then sort of constant anxiety until the appointed time comes and things go smoothly. This is far more obvious at home than it is at work, because I can see how the importance of work, not just as a means of earning money, but for a long time the dominant element of my identity and sort of source of validation, meant that I almost saw all of the professional planning and organisation as a kind of job in itself, which I suppose it is. The desire and I think the need to make progress meant that I simply could not fail at it, which provided the motivation for kind of all the effort and focus that went into it. I actually became particularly good at estimating things because of this, because I almost went way over the top with thoroughness to combat the stress and anxiety of sticking my neck out on timings. It's a living, anyway, you might say. But after my diagnosis, my eyes opened to the fact that these coping mechanisms, whilst they're useful, were in fact a kind of denial. Understanding that the anxiety and shame I was burying with effort was actually coming from just the way I am wired, opened the door to consciously trying to develop better, more constructive, open, precise, and explicit tools to reduce some of that cognitive load. I've tried various different time management approaches down the years, largely because every corporate figurehead tells you that's what you must do, but I could never really make any of them work, which made me feel a bit inadequate and kind of ashamed, really. Simply concentrating hard and using fear of failure as guardrails was far more effective in my experience. However, I've come up with an approach that's working well for me, which I use every day, and I'll include a link to a Miro board in the episode sort of synopsis thingy so you can see what I use. But I just thought I'd pick out three, doing the rule of three thing again, elements that have made the difference now that I am being open and honest about how my head works, so that you can maybe incorporate some of these things into your own planning. The first thing I've done is tap into my sensitivity and feelings much more. Most time management tools focus on sort of the brass tacks of what needs to be done and the associated priority of it. Of course, that makes sense, and that's in my approach as sort of a kind of hygiene. However, acknowledging that I'm more sensitive than most, I chose to lean on something I took away from reading Roxy Mafusi's book, Manifest, which is about visualisation, sort of that you get back from the universe what you put out there. What I do is I think first about what a really great day would look like, both in terms of the work I've got to do and how I want to feel personally. It sounds a bit lame, but it does actually trigger how the best outcome would feel, which provides motivation that you can kind of tap into at a visceral level. The other thing I do is I go into ChatGPT, AI, and ask it for a famous quote about, what kind of encouragement I think I'll need that day. Again, this seems a bit basic and maybe a bit twee, but it's just another source of inspiration and something that engages the brain and the heart, because as well as a relatable quote, it often just makes me think for a minute about the person that said it, and I kind of feel engaged and a bit comforted that I'm not alone. I think priming the old interest-based nervous system to stay focused on the task is really what I'm trying to do here. The other thing I do is I think ahead to what situations I think could possibly trigger me during the day. Being an emotional person and naturally impulsive, you get triggered a lot, even if you don't show it, particularly at work. Rather than trying to squash it down and just somehow cope, I just sort of think honestly about the day ahead and what could possibly trigger me, what feelings I should look out for, and suggest sort of ahead of time possible coping strategies. This draws upon things that I learned from meditating, which I wasn't great at, but I kind of understood what it was trying to do, sort of metacognition and trying to notice feelings without acting on them quite so much. I mean, does this stop me getting triggered? Of course not, but it does make me feel better about the fact that I do and that I'm being honest with myself. I also sort of against each trigger make a note of what good progress to look like. Again, back to manifesting it, it's kind of a visualization thing, but it also reiterates to myself that perfection is impossible and we're all just a work in progress looking for sort of gradual improvement. Sort of like a note to self not to be quite so hard on myself anyway. The final thing I wanted to mention is that I've drawn upon what I learnt from my course of CBT therapy. You may remember when we spoke about it before, I talked about putting unhelpful beliefs at the root of stress and anxiety on trial to try and rewire them with more helpful beliefs. As part of my daily planning, and often as a follow-on from thinking about triggers, I then think about what beliefs I might find getting in my way and go through the exercise of evidence for, evidence against, and then what a more helpful belief would be. Again, very simple and by no means foolproof, but in terms of feelings and mindset, it's just enough to get me into a slightly better place if I'm worrying about something. As a related thought, I also have created what I've called a belief bank, which is where I've been storing up the set of more helpful beliefs. There's quite a few now after a good few months of doing this, perhaps because, I feel I might be able to do something creative with them, and sometimes just so I can go back over them. I might turn them into a desktop wallpaper or something I can stick on my wall. I don't know. Some food for thought. They're useful to refer to on my planner anyway, which I can always go back to during the day. There's more to it, as you can imagine, but I hope you can see just how a bit of sort of self-honesty and just trying to tap into how I tick rather than deny it has got me into, touch wood, so far, a sort of a better place. I try and make it something I do every workday and protect the time at the start of the day. Sometimes the time has got squashed still, and it's noticeable how much worse I feel if I miss it completely. So it's a good sense check that having, invested that time in myself and committed to it, it's become actually something that's quite critical to my well-being. I think that will probably do us for today. I'm not 100% sure about next time yet and what we're going to talk about. Possibly something creative, maybe musical again, let's see. I'll surprise you anyway. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. You can get in touch via glitchyswitchpodcast@gmail.com with your thoughts and suggestions of things you'd like to hear about. You can also follow me on @glitchyswitchpodcast on Instagram for more on ADHD life and to find out what's coming next.